Pretty tough loss. Once again, frustrating. This one, didn't come down to, one play or two plays. They kind of physically, I thought they were, it's first time, I don't know, not the first time, but they physically were very much pushing us around and moving us up front. Felt like we were playing catch up the entire day.
Mark, as a DB, longtime DB guy, how physically painful was that watching the opposing quarterback average 37 yards completion?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that. In my any secondary I've been a part of. We knew DJ. Heck, is this right? Just seven completions.
Yeah,
Wow.
5 for 40.
5 for
Wow. Yeah.
Yo, listen, you heard it there. You heard him say verbatim that Florida out-physicaled them. That's not really a familiar statement that we're used to hearing Stoops say in terms of his team. If you actually follow college football, you would know that Kentucky is actually an extremely physical team. They're not one to lay down and just let you kind of run all over them. But guess what? Florida had their way. And Florida is not really known to out-physical teams, at least as of late. And what did they do? They out-physicaled Kentucky. Now, this comes as a shock to me because this didn't really be something I was expecting necessarily, but I also know based off the post-game press conference that I just played for y'all momentarily right before I was speaking on this, that it wasn't something he expected either. Now, Florida has been on a 30-game winning streak against Kentucky, and then that got snapped during the Dan Mullen era, and everybody thought, oh, Dan Mullen's not the guy. How do you lose to a team that you haven't lost to in 30-plus years? Now, granted, I'm going to tell y'all firsthand, I'm 32 years old. And I didn't expect to see it. I haven't seen it my entire life up until recently. Now, guess what? All of a sudden, Kentucky's on a 3-game winning streak. Kudos to Stoops and that staff. I mean, he's literally living the gravy life. He's over there winning 8 to 10 games a year, making millions, and they don't expect anything more. But, excuse me, I'll digress. That's at least until recently. Now, all of a sudden, Stoops has to own up to the losses that he has as if Kentucky's been a powerhouse for a long time. Here's my thing on Stoops. You can clearly tell in that post-game press conference that he is extremely burnt out. The guy doesn't really want to do this anymore. Now, I don't know if he doesn't want to do it anymore in relation to Kentucky or if he doesn't want to do it anymore in relation to just coaching altogether. But I can tell you firsthand that that was a big loss for him. That was an expected win for that fan base, for that program. They've 100% dominated Florida for the longest time, at least, like I mentioned, the last 3 years. So that was a big hit. I had taken some time. I was listening to some other fan, post-game reaction videos, and I was taking it in, and I heard a lot of people say, they made the drive from Lexington, Kentucky, all the way down to Gainesville, Florida. They anticipated it being a closer game, especially considering Kentucky had the number 3 overall defense in the entire country, and they obviously have a ton of first, second, and third round draft picks on the defensive side of the ball, specifically that defensive tackle. Y'all know who I'm talking about. He made some plays, but it wasn't what we were expecting, right? Florida had their way with this game. Literally, they could have done anything they wanted to in this game, and they did. Now, what does this say about Florida? We can actually go all the way back. Now, I understand you guys want me to discuss the actual game itself, but I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has already been saying. That's not what this channel is all about. That's not what I want to do. I'm going to speak straight from what I've seen and straight from the heart. I expect you guys as the viewers to actually understand that and know that I'm going to be as real as possible. If I'm a Florida fan and I'm going into this game, I'm not thinking that this game is going to turn out the way that it did, to be real. I totally anticipated DJ Lagway. Granted, he is a 5-star quarterback. Granted, he did do well, in his first start, that first week of practice, having first team reps going into the Sanford game. And then he obviously blew up the scoreboard and then broke some records. And then he had his trials and tribulations against Texas and A&M. And after that, obviously, Graham Mertz came back and Graham Mertz was starting to catch a rhythm, a groove. And don't get me started on this whole Morgan Wallen concept that was happening in Neyland Stadium, where they had resoiled the turf, and they believe that may have contributed to the ACL tear, not just for Graham Mertz, but for their linebacker at Tennessee. Here's the thing. DJ Lagway came in that Tennessee game. He did his thing, man. Like, you have what? Under a minute left in that Tennessee game. You're down by 7. Hostile environment, 102,000 fans. Nobody expects Florida to be doing anything because Tennessee has that elite defense. And then all of a sudden, Graham Mertz comes out of nowhere. Excuse me, not Graham Mertz. What am I thinking? Here I am, just losing my mind. DJ Lagway comes out of nowhere, leads the team down. Well, he had 2 or 3 drives beforehand where it had meant nothing. Essentially, they had punted the ball. I think there was like 4 minutes left, and Florida had to punt the ball in that Tennessee game, and then they punted. Obviously, Florida's defense has found a way to show up when it matters over the last 3 weeks, and they forced a punt. Then DJ Lagway has the game on his shoulders, unlike Nico, and he makes it happen. Scores. This dude is legitimately a generational talent. He is well above, and beyond his years in terms of maturity. He understands what he's looking at. Yeah, the game might get ahead of him a little bit from time to time, but at the end of the day, the dude made the plays when it mattered, and he tied that game. Now, Tennessee did a good job in terms of like dialing up that pressure and overtime, and obviously they ended up winning the game because, just like what I was mentioning a moment ago in terms of Tennessee's defense, that luck is eventually going to run out for Tennessee. Florida's defense is absolutely elite as of the last few weeks, and they were on the road. They were against the ropes. Of course it's going to let go. Of course it's going to let go. So that's what happened. When's that going to happen for Tennessee? Now, granted, you can obviously tell I'm very passionate about what's going to happen in terms of Tennessee, and then obviously Florida ended up being put against the ropes, and they lost that game against Tennessee, but then they ended up bouncing back. No, they had the opportunity to obviously lay down going into this Kentucky game. Who in the hell gets up for Kentucky? Now, granted, Florida should have, and like they did, because they were on a 3-game losing streak, like I've mentioned multiple times already. But here's my thought on DJ Lagway going into this game. You all saw, I just played it for you. Mark Stoops, verbatim, looked at his stat chart while he was in the post-game press conference, and he said, 7 completions? Wow. He said he's never seen anything like that during his entire time as a coach, or at least at Kentucky. 7 completions for 259 yards. He averaged 39 yards a completion. What does that say for the rest of the SEC? even if Billy Napier is not the head coach at Florida, let's just say hypothetically he's not, or maybe let's just say hypothetically he is. It really doesn't matter. If you are unfamiliar with DJ Lagway and his family, they are obviously Florida alums. It's going to take a lot to actually pull him away. Now, granted, I understand you want to put yourself in a great position, but does money end up being the end all be all and what ends up pulling DJ Lagway away from a legacy? I don't know. I guess we're about to find out. But Florida's figured something out. And here's my thing with this. The amount of freshmen that were playing in this game that made such a significant impact in this game is pretty impressive. And if I'm the rest of the SEC, not just the SEC, because we all know the SEC runs the entire collegiate atmosphere, I'd be concerned because Florida legitimately returns at least 75 to 80% of their entire defense next year. They return, I'd say, 65 to 75% of their entire offense next year. Now, the only pieces that they'll miss in terms of like what's leaving is obviously Graham Mertz and a couple of pieces from that offensive line, but maybe, just maybe, with the new era of college football, with the NIL, the transfer portal, Billy Napier's obviously found a way to recruit what pieces he needs. He's done that specifically from a athlete position, not necessarily offensive line. I believe Florida hasn't recruited a 5-star offensive lineman since 2009. So we'll see what happens with that. And obviously, as talented as DJ Lagway is and all of the wide receivers that are going to be returning next year, if they obviously do and they don't end up entering the transfer portal, which I don't technically see because I do believe that these players are legitimate Gators at the end of the day. If they do return and Billy Napier also returns, knowing he does have an eye for talent. I mean, this entire roster is built around him. I do believe that there are a lot of people, even though Florida's been down, they believed that Florida was actually going to be a good team heading into the year, and they were extremely shocked when Florida let those games down. But if you actually take a step back, look at it from a logical perspective, the 3 games that Florida has lost, Texas A&M, 1 loss. Opening week, Notre Dame has 1 loss. Texas A&M's actually undefeated in SEC play, so there you go. Miami, don't know why I started with them because that was actually the first loss, so my bad on that. But Miami, undefeated. Now, granted, Miami is actually begging for a loss with the types of games that they've been playing lately. Super close. They can obviously score on offense, but the defense looks a little skeptical, suspicious. Like, people are actually scoring on that defense. So we'll see. I don't know exactly what to make of Miami right now. I mean, they obviously have that DNA to where it doesn't matter how close the game is. They're going to win the game. They're finding a way to win each game, even if they're behind by 28 points. I'm referencing that California game, which to me, honestly, I turned that off. I thought that was an automatic win for California. But good job to, that coaching staff, first of all, and then obviously Cam Ward saying, that's not going to happen. We're going to win this game. And they did. So good job for them. I don't know what game they're going to lose. Maybe the Clemson game. They obviously don't have Clemson on their schedule this year. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll meet up in the ACC championship, knowing that it is no longer divisionalized, just like the SEC. So they might meet up at that point. But, hey, that's neither here or there. We're going to figure that out when that time comes. If they do, though, Clemson's actually playing some pretty hot ball right now. That'll be a really good game. Clemson's also playing defense. So that's something Miami is yet to actually encounter, a team that's playing and clicking on all cylinders. But I don't want to be the kind of person that's saying, hey, that's the ACC, right? Because this is a college football podcast. We're going to talk about all games. Now, granted, whether you agree with what I'm saying or you don't, at the end of the day, it is what it is. The ACC is not anything in comparison to the SEC, just like the Big Ten. But we're going to talk more about the ACC as we continue. We're going to talk more about the Big Ten. We're going to talk about the Pac 12, 13, 14, whatever the hell you want to call it now, because obviously the conference realignment has confused a bunch of things. My whole thought with this is you have freshmen making impact on this Florida squad, and there's obviously proof that development is actually happening down there in Gainesville. Florida had no business losing that Tennessee game. If you're a Tennessee fan, you're obviously going to disagree with that. Tennessee found a way to win that game. Kudos to you. That's obviously why Florida has a loss on that record. But you know just as well as anyone who follows college football that that shouldn't have happened. But let's just get back to this Kentucky-Florida game. Florida was dialing up everything that they could. And if you were to actually, which I know you can't do this, but if you were to actually disregard that kickoff return that Kentucky had, this game really isn't even close. This game was so far away from being close that Florida fans were extremely happy. Kentucky fans were extremely shocked. All I can say is if you have a true freshman, not a redshirt, a true freshman, who is just doing nothing but progressively getting better and better, and then you combine that with a backfield that is nothing but true freshmen as well, then you combine that with a defense that is nothing full of just sophomores and juniors, that will more than likely return despite what that coaching, we'll see what that coaching looks like. But Florida's going to be a dangerous team, and they're catching fire at the right time. So there are a lot of you that's not going to agree with me, but let's just take a look at this. Obviously, they have a bye week. They're going into the Georgia game. Then they'll be playing Texas. Then they'll go LSU at home, Ole Miss, Florida State. If Florida continues to play defense at the elite level that they're playing, which in my opinion, if people want to reference the Tennessee defense, I do believe Florida's defense at this very moment, if you were to compare it in the last 3 weeks, Florida's defense has outperformed Tennessee's defense. Florida is going to give themselves a fighting chance to actually compete in every single game that they have. Now, a lot of you aren't going to agree with that because everybody wants to think, oh, well, Florida's just not what they used to be. And that might be true, but we don't know for sure. This gauntlet is what people were emphasizing to be the downfall for the entire program and Billy Napier's career before the season even started. And when Billy Napier obviously opened up this season, losing to Miami, losing to Texas A&M, and then obviously losing a game that literally just fell down to coaching errors on the Florida staff altogether to Tennessee. I don't know, man. You live, you learn. Georgia is proven to be a really tough challenge. That's obviously a big rivalry over there in Jacksonville. Georgia has obviously put Florida in their place in terms of it looking like a JV squad in comparison to a varsity squad. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks. I mean, we already know what happened when Florida took one bye week. They made a massive jump. Can they make another? And if so, where does that come from? Does that come from an offensive perspective? Because we already know the defense made a massive leap in their first bye week. It could come from an offensive perspective, but if you're a Florida fan, you're hoping it just comes from a coaching perspective, right? Because right now you are, a couple of plays away from just having only 2 losses and actually beating Tennessee in Neyland Stadium with 102,000 fans. A lot of people actually hated on this Florida squad, but if you combine all of the losses that they have in terms of that overall record, I'm not going to go with the wins because all that matters is Miami's undefeated. Texas A&M has 1 loss at this very moment. They might very well lose to LSU this coming week, but that's yet to be determined. But at this very moment, Texas A&M only has 1 loss. Guess who else only has 1 loss? Tennessee. So the 3 losses that Florida has those teams have a combined loss record of just 2 losses. I don't know, man. I don't know. Florida might have found something. They might have found something. That's all I got to say. Kentucky's obviously not going to do anything else. Kentucky has legitimately no cohesiveness in terms of offense. I don't think that's necessarily Brock Bowers, Brock Vandergrift's issue. I don't think that has anything to do with that. I think Kentucky has an incredible offensive line. I think Kentucky has a decent stable of running backs. I think that the majority of that just boils down to game planning and actually being prepared and ready to play. And I don't think that Mark Stoops has done that. And that goes back to what I said when I first started this. I'm not sure if Mark Stoops is really into this. I'm not really sure if he really wants to be the head coach there anymore. It looks like to me, based off, I see the pre-coaching conference, going into each game, and then obviously the post, game conferences. It looks like Mark Stoops is a little bit burnout. I'll leave that to you all. I mean, I'd love to hear your all's thoughts on that, especially you Kentucky fans. What do you think about that? I mean, at the end of the day, Kentucky does have an elite defense. They didn't show that on Saturday night against Florida. They let not only a true freshman quarterback have his way, but they let a true freshman running back tie the actual university's record in terms of overall touchdowns in one game and in his debut as an official starter. And that was at 5, where he met and matched the record, where he actually ended up including himself in the same audience as Trey Burton. Coincidentally, actually had 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. And then, of course, Tim Tebow, who also had 5 touchdowns, but it wasn't against Kentucky. Thank goodness for you Wildcat fans. It was actually against South Carolina. So there's a lot to say about that. Now, let me just kind of boil this down, and I'll conclude. If Florida continues to play elite defense, they're going to be in every game that they play. DJ Lagway is doing something that not only Florida hasn't seen in a long time, but college football altogether. When's the last time you've seen a true freshman quarterback only complete 7 passes, and 5 of those 7 passes went beyond 40-plus yards? They were all explosive. I mean, the dude, again, he was 7 for 14, 259 yards, 1 touchdown. He also had almost 49 yards rushing? I mean, that's just insane. Definitely a generational talent. The game is not moving too fast. He definitely showed that when he was playing against Tennessee in that elite defense. He legitimately almost brought Florida to a victory against Tennessee when Graham Mertz went down due to that ACL tear. Away at night, 102,000 fans, and then he picked up right where he left off, having first-team reps all week. Damn. There's just so many things that I have to say about this Florida team, and it might sound like I'm a Florida fan, but at the end of the day, guess what? I see what I see. And I see a Florida team that's catching a stride right now, catching some sort of momentum that it might actually carry them on. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to beat Georgia, because Georgia obviously showed up in Austin, Texas this past weekend as well whenever they played Texas. That defense was just absolutely disgusting. It was nasty. But can they be consistent? We haven't seen that yet from a Georgia squad. Maybe they'll get some players back. Maybe this bye week will actually help them. I have no idea, but I can tell you one thing. Just like Tennessee, that Georgia offense is struggling. Pretty bad, actually. It's pretty bad. Now, Trevor Etienne seems to be one of the bright spots, which if you're a Florida fan, I'm sure that makes you sick to your stomach. But after watching Jaden Ball, true freshman, rush for 5 touchdowns against the number 3 defense in the entire country, I'm sure you're just probably just brushing that off the shoulder like, ain't a thing. Especially when you consider that stable of running backs that are actually behind him that are also young. They're just not getting their opportunity yet. Florida's got talent, man. A lot of people want to brush them off like they ain't a thing because they already have 3 losses. But guess what? If they end up beating Georgia, surprise, maybe they might have a letdown at Texas. But we also know Texas, and they haven't faced adversity all year. What, they beat Michigan early in the year, and all of a sudden they think they're running the SEC? That's not true. We know that. Obviously, they faced their first true SEC opponent in Georgia at home, and they got embarrassed. And if you're a Texas fan, you probably don't like that either. But guess what? I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to spit it again like I see it. Now, if we were to fast forward, obviously, past the Texas game, because we already know Texas is going to lay down the minute they face adversity. Hell, I think I saw something the other day where Quinn Ewers, somebody had posted on Twitter that he was actually going to sit out and prepare for the NFL draft, and then it got deleted immediately. So we don't know if that's even true or not. We'll see if he actually hits the field this coming week. We'll know if that's the case. And then obviously you have Manning taking over. Does that not solidify and prove my point that Texas just lays down the minute they face adversity? Texas don't run the SEC. Hey, homie, welcome. Welcome to the SEC. Welcome. We'll see what happens. Now, granted, that is a a noon kickoff game in Austin. Now, granted, also Texas is used to playing noon kickoffs, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. Florida is obviously having to go across a couple of time zones, so that might affect them a little bit. But if they continue to play the way they're playing, and then obviously Texas, depending on how that game against Vanderbilt goes, we'll see what happens with that. Now, granted, that Vanderbilt game should be an easy bounce back, but this 2024 Vanderbilt team ain't the same. Goodness, I could only imagine what the narrative would be if Texas actually loses to Vanderbilt heading into the Florida game, heading into whatever game. They might even have a bye week. I don't know. The reason why I'm saying that is because I know that Florida has a bye week this week. They're going to play Georgia, and then all of a sudden, Texas plays Vanderbilt this week during the bye of Florida's. So I really have no idea who Texas plays next week. I'll have to take a look at that. But what happens if Texas is a 2-loss team going into that Florida game? Is the momentum the same? Is that locker room the same? Is the culture the same? We're going to find out. They have a lot of adversity to face. If I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, I might be raising my horns, but not in the most positive way. Definitely questioning some things. I'm not questioning Mark Sarkisian, but I'm definitely questioning the strength of their ability to face adversity. Now, granted, this is not a Florida breakdown necessarily, but you can obviously tell that there are a lot of people writing Florida off, and I'm not one of them. I really am not one of them. I actually thought that Florida was going to start the season a lot stronger than they are, but now they're starting to turn into the team that I thought they were always going to be. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest because obviously these are shows for the future. Granted, Florida has to play Georgia, then Texas, then LSU, then Ole Miss, then Florida State, and then we'll see if they obviously reach bowl eligibility. They're currently sitting at 4 wins. But Kentucky, bro, if I were to just transition into the Kentucky side of things, good luck. If I had some sad music, I'd be playing that behind me right now, just like the Josh Pate show. But I'm not going to do that because he actually took that. And guess what? That's a great idea. But Kentucky season's over. Kentucky, I don't think that they're going to do much because I don't think that their head coach wants to do much anymore. I don't think that Stoops is 100% bought in. And if I'm a player, I'm feeding off of what I see. Now, granted, he can go in the locker room and he can say whatever the hell he wants. But it ain't the same. He doesn't seem to have the same passion that I'm used to seeing. We'll see what happens with Kentucky. We'll probably circle back, talk more about that come that time. But here's the thing with the Florida. They're going to go into a bye week. We've already seen what they've done when they went into one bye week, and all of a sudden they come out, they look like a completely different team, world beaters. I'm not saying they're going to be Georgia or honestly finish this November gauntlet that they have on the positive side of things. But they do have LSU at home. They do have Ole Miss at home. And obviously Georgia, Florida is always a neutral site. Texas is at noon. And Florida State is on the road, and we all know Florida State is what? No better than a Division III team at this moment. Now, I'm throwing a lot of shade towards a lot of teams at this very moment, especially during this, show. But, again, I spit out how I see it. So, we'll circle back to all of this. This essentially is a breakdown of the Kentucky-Florida game, and there's really not much to say about Kentucky. So if you're a Kentucky fan and you were trying to tune into this and try and figure out what I had to say in terms of your team, it's nothing good. It's almost as if Kentucky's transitioning backwards, as if like they were Kentucky of old. So we'll see what happens come that time as the season continues to unfold. I think Florida has a bright future, and even if Florida doesn't end this November gauntlet in a positive fashion, you have to understand that the majority of the offensive side of the players are going to be returning, and the majority of the defensive side of the players are going to return. Now, of course, that does vary based off of the coaching. Is Billy Napier going to return next year? That's a conversation for another day. We don't know. But it does seem like these players want to play for him. And we also know earlier, before Florida ended up playing, what was it? Their first game against Miami, their athletic director came out and he said, hey, Billy Napier's here to stay for a while. So we'll see. I don't know. There's some narrative that he's already gone and he's just coaching for now and he'll be gone before we know it. It's already a predetermined decision. But then there's also some narrative that, hey, look, these players don't want him to go. Damn, this is so much fun. I have so much fun doing this with y'all. So I appreciate you guys obviously tuning in for this. But we're going to go ahead and move into the power rankings that I have for the CFB Whispers show. Again, I'll break down what those power rankings are, exactly how we come up with the rankings that we have. This isn't the AP poll, the coaches poll, the committee. This is a CFB Whispers show exclusive, and I'm excited to really dive on into that. So if you guys are a Florida fan, if you are a Kentucky fan, despite me not having really many nice things to say, just go ahead and go down there. Just a friendly reminder for now, like, subscribe, share this video. Obviously, it doesn't cost you a dime. Appreciate the support. This is something I'm doing obviously on my own and for a lot of personal reasons and just to have fun with it. I don't have any sponsorships, but if you guys obviously want to sponsor me, just go ahead and shoot me an email. You know how you can reach me. This is we talk ball at cfbwhispers.com. So excited to obviously discuss potential partnerships in the future. But this is something that we're going to be doing moving forward, and I'm excited to continue to bring you guys great content. And if you guys have a team or a topic or anything in relation to that you want me to discuss, let me know.